Good morning and welcome to the UBC Learning Circle. My name is Crystal Morris. I'm the Aboriginal Education Coordinator for the UBC Centre of Excellence in Indigenous Health, formerly the Aboriginal People's Health. Now that is a mouthful. First of all, I want to recognize the traditional territory for which our downtown office resides. We are in the beautiful downtown of Vancouver on the Musqueam territory. So I just wanted to recognize, the traditional ancestors and the people that, have resided in this territory. And today's presentation, healthy eating for better mental health well-being. Healthy eating for better mental well-being. So today we're joined by the beautiful, talented Rebecca Sovdi. Thank you for joining us again today. Today's presentation will be about an hour to 2 hours. There will be some opportunity for interaction and questions. Do you want it at the end of the presentation or as the presentation goes along?
Both is fine.
Both is fine. Okay, so for people in the webinar, if you have questions that you would like to ask or comments you would like to make, please type them into the chat box and I will relay the questions to Rebecca. So I'm going to introduce Rebecca now. She is a registered dietitian and has worked in First Nations Health for 7 years. She completed her bachelor's degree at the University of Saskatchewan and a master's in public health at the University of Waterloo. She is passionate about promoting health through a wellness lens that helps others find balance and enjoyment in life. Rebecca grew up in a small town in southern Saskatchewan and now enjoys living as a visitor on the traditional Coast Salish territories. So Rebecca, thank you for joining us. I always enjoy your presentations and all the work that we've been doing together here at the UBC Learning Circle. And so I'm going to turn the table over to Rebecca, and thank you and welcome.
Thank you, Crystal. And just want to open by saying thanks very much for continuing to work with us for this Aboriginal Nutrition series. It's been an absolute pleasure, and we're very happy to keep coming back, so thank you very much. So as Crystal said, today we're going to talk about healthy eating for better mental well-being, which is a very important and hot topic right now. We've heard from many communities across the province that mental health is the #1 priority for communities. So if we can bring this wellness lens to it from a healthy eating perspective, it's one of the places that we can hopefully help communities start to heal a bit. So we'll just start out a little bit by talking about the vision of the First Nations Health Authority, which is healthy, self-determining and vibrant First Nations children, families, and communities. So hopefully the information that you're getting today is a piece of that puzzle to put together a healthy, self-determining and vibrant community. With our focus on nutrition and mental health, we're going to talk about healthy eating practices and how they can influence upon improving mental health or decreasing mental health, depending on what your diet looks like. We're going to talk about nutrition and how it affects the brain, our moods and behaviors. We'll talk about nutrition for children, setting a foundation and how what they eat can affect their mental health. We'll talk about how healthy eating relates to mental illness and mental health. And then we'll talk a little bit about normal and intuitive eating and how food can be medicine. For healthy eating and holistic health, the foods that we eat, whom we eat them with, and how these foods nourish our bodies are part of that holistic health balance. So simply put, healthy eating contributes to not just physical health, but also a healthy mind, a healthy body, and a healthy spirit. And we often just think about food as related to our physical health, and we forget a little bit about how it relates to everything else. Unfortunately, many of the foods that we eat today are over-processed and contain lots of chemicals and preservatives. And in addition to that, they lack nutrients to support good healthy eating or to support good health. Our ultimate goal is to find balance in our lives. we live in a society that is overloaded constantly with information from the internet, books, magazines, emails, news, media. We're constantly overloaded with food options and food information. Industry also wants us to think that we are too busy to prepare meals and that we need their help by using ready-made meals or by eating outside of the home. And then we end up eating a lot of overprocessed foods. I'm going to share a story. Whoops. And there's a bit of text, so just focus on the story a bit, and it's got some really good messages. So it's a story about Chinook, a polar bear, who lived up north above the Arctic Circle for most of the year and enjoyed swimming through ice-choked waters, hunting for seals and succulent fish that kept him well-fueled and healthy. His abundant body fat and dense fur kept him warm in the harsh climate that would quickly claim the lives of many other creatures that tried to habitate the area. When the long winter arrived and completely covered the sea with ice, hunting was no longer possible for Chinook, so he dug himself a cave, crawled in, and comfortably slept away the unforgiving winter. As he hibernated, his ample store of body fat provided the nutrition and warmth he needed to stay alive. Polar bears have evolved over the ages to not only survive, but to thrive in harsh glacial climates. In the spring, the young bear awakened with a voracious appetite and started the cycle all over again by hunting and devouring everything that he could catch, storing fat for another winter. Unfortunately, one day his life changed forever. It was morning, and Chinook's growling stomach was worsening as he noticed a large pile of seal meat laying on the ice. He thought it must be his lucky day and made his way over to the seal when he suddenly found himself caught in a trap. He cried out in alarm and tried desperately to run, but it was no use. He was confused and frightened. Chinook's troubles had just begun as he suddenly found himself on a plane, taking him off to entertain children as a zoo animal. Unfortunately, the plane developed engine troubles and crashed deep in the jungles of New Guinea. Luckily, Chinook was unhurt in the crash and was joyous to discover that the impact of the crash had sprung open the cage in which he was contained. He ran, desperate to regain his freedom, lumbering through the jungle as fast as he could, attempting to put as much distance between himself and the captors as possible. But the jungle heat so quickly brought him to exhaustion that he collapsed in a small stream, gasping for air, sick, confused, and unhappy. As Chinook lay there, a couple of pygmies walked by, discovering him laying helpless in the stream. The pygmies had never seen anything as huge, white, lazy, and round as Chinook. They gawked and laughed at him, and went to find more villagers to ridicule him. Eventually, the tribe's shaman, a physical and spiritual healer, joined the crowd and told her tribe to quit acting like fools. She ordered the tribe to pour water over the white brother and help him drink, seeing that he could not survive the heat without being cooled off. The shaman then found Chinook the coldest pool of water in the jungle, and slowly his strength began to return. The cool water did not have lovely blocks of ice, seals, and salmon, but it was deep enough for him to fully submerge his body. Over time, Chinook and the tribal members became friends. The tribe helped him to find food to sustain him, but it never satisfied him in the way that this old diet of seal, salmon, and Eskimos did. And although he could never again travel from the cool mountain pool, he lived relatively happy on fruit, berries, mammals, and the occasional incorrigible child. Over years, his weight decreased slightly and his fur thinned, but he never fully adapted to his new surroundings. Most of the human family tree evolved in environments in which food and the sustaining life energy it contained were scarce, and the ability to store excess fat had strong survival value. Many of those among us who now grapple with weight and hunger are descendants from the survivors of that evolutionary adaptation. In spite of a growing body of science related to the major complexities and factors contributing to obesity and disease, many people see obesity and disease as a character flaw, such as a lack of willpower, self-indulgence, laziness, a lack of discipline, or gluttony. We criticize and blame and judge others for being overweight or having disease, which further damages our self-esteem. A strong sense of self-worth and self-efficacy are of utmost importance when long-lasting, difficult behavior change is needed. Chinook, in spite of his newly adopted diet of berries and grasses, would never develop the svelte line of a jaguar. He was a different kind of animal. Acceptance of the body weight that supports health and wellness, even though it might not meet the current concept of what is stylish and attractive, is important for an individual. There's also another important message in the story about Chinook, and I'll share a quote from a Yakima tribal nurse that says it very well. If you lose your food, you lose your culture, and it has a devastating effect on the psyche.
Hello? Hello, somebody just joined the room?
Yes.
I'm sorry, do you have a question, or can you mute your microphone, please? Do you have a question, or can you mute your microphone, please? Thank you.
Thank you.
We just joined the room. Sorry, we had so much trouble getting on. So we didn't realize our speaker was on. So we will turn it off now. We're from Redstone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. And thanks for joining. So food is culture, and it's linked to so many aspects of the spirit. Food is also medicine. It naturally heals and nourishes the body, and it brings people together. In the past 200 years, Aboriginal communities have seen significant changes related to food. There's been reduced control of land, disrupted harvesting practices, dramatic changes in diet related to changing environment and residential schools. This, combined with other technological and convenience changes, has created diets that are primarily made up of sugar, preservatives, and food colorings and flavorings. And we know that there are long-lasting effects of residential schools on eating habits such as poverty, hunger, low iron, protein malnutrition, depression, diabetes and other chronic illnesses, frustration, disconnection with the land, and abnormal eating behaviors. And we want to keep in mind that our eating habits are shaped by so many other things than just choice. Whether we're celebrating something with friends and family, we're sitting around a table or perhaps eating in front of the TV. If it's some sort of a special holiday, depending on where we live, if we live in a rural environment or an urban environment, impacts the type of diet that we have. The season that it is, if it's winter and we can't grow as much, or spring, summer, fall when we have better harvesting, the amount of money that we have for food, and whether we're young or old. All of these elements impact our healthy food relationship, or the relationship we have with food. The policies we have in communities, our access and availability, whom we're eating with, what our traditional practices are, the climate and our environment, our beliefs about food, our dental health, and whether or not we can eat the foods that we want to based on dental health, the influence of food industry, the cost of food around us, our mental and emotional state, and our income. This means that many of these things can become barriers to what we eat, or perhaps support. Now, thinking more at the biological level in our bodies, related to nutrition in the brain. Food intake can affect a person's mood, behavior, and brain function almost immediately. As an example, think about how you feel after you've eaten a meal that's highly processed, such as a fast food meal, or perhaps you were running short on time, so you grabbed a bag of chips and a pop for lunch. Or perhaps you skipped a meal because you don't have time. Do you feel irritable, grouchy, angry, tired, or sad? These are some of the immediate effects that nutrition can have on our brain. Over the long term, if we're eating a lot of this, it can also affect our emotional and mental health over the long term as well. Eating foods that are highly processed and loaded with food additives and years of this non-nutritive eating can create nutritional deficiencies and increase risk for mental health. Symptoms such as poor mood and behavior can possibly be the first sign of a nutritional deficiency in both adults and children. Mood alterations and feeling unwell could also be related to food sensitivities or intolerances. A food intolerance or an adverse reaction to food that does not involve the immune system. And just the difference between what's a food allergy and a food intolerance. A food intolerance is an adverse reaction to food that does not involve the immune system, whereas a food allergy does involve the immune system reactions. Food intolerances can include intolerances to additives, preservatives, food colorings and flavorings, gluten, wheat, or lactose. And food intolerances can manifest in things such as irritable bowel syndrome, migraines, depression, fatigue, or just general feelings of illness or not feeling very well. When we look at the brain, it's made up of 61% water, 17% protein, 13% fat, 6% minerals, and 1% carbohydrates. So food isn't just fuel for your brain, like gas is fuel for your car. Food actually is your brain. Every cell in your brain, every synapse, every neurotransmitter, it all comes from the food that we eat. Healthy food equals healthy synapses and good thought processes. When we're eating unhealthy food, not so much. If your brain was a car, the food that you eat will determine whether you have cloth or leather seats, the quality of the metals used, the accuracy of your tachometer, the type of stereo system, and the speakers, plus the type of fuel that you're using. Our brain cells are our largest body cells in the body, and they're the most energy demanding. They are also the most fragile and susceptible to damage when energy demands are not properly met. Our brain cells are particularly sensitive to toxins in the environment, such as aluminum, lead, pesticides, MSG, aspartame, food preservatives, and additives. A change in one's diet, resulting in different amounts of energy intake or nutrient intake, can alter a person's brain chemistry and nerve function, having an effect on their mood, sleep patterns, and ways of thinking. So to function well, the brain needs a balanced supply of complex carbohydrates, essential fats, proteins, and vitamins and minerals, and water, lots of water. So we want to remember, note to self, if I eat like crap, I will feel like crap. Now, if we think about nutrition and children's behaviors, children's bodies are even more sensitive to poor eating habits and foods. Often, children start their day off with foods that are loaded with simple sugars, artificial colors, and artificial flavors, because that's what is marketed to children as breakfast foods, or perhaps they're not having breakfast in the morning. They arrive at school and perhaps they're disruptive in class, jittery, irritable, they're falling asleep, or perhaps they're rude to other children, and the teacher decides that there's something wrong with the child and wants to label them as having an illness or something like that, rather than it being linked possibly to the foods that they're eating or an intolerance to the foods that they're eating. Some children are more sensitive than others to processed foods. So we have to be sensitive or think about, the child and whether or not they have ultrasensitivities. Foods containing preservatives such as sulfites, caffeine, juice with lots of sugar, or other food sensitivities. So for parents and caregivers of children with behavioral problems, one possible solution is to try eliminating processed foods and see what happens to the child. If there are other intense elimination diets where you think that there's some other type of sensitivity, always talk to a doctor before trying any sort of elimination diet that might get rid of certain nutrients out of the child's diet. But for terms of processed foods, that one's a bit easier. Allergy testing can also be done to test for food sensitivities beyond processed foods. So again, talk to the doctor about that. Antibiotics can also sometimes change mood. Antibiotics eliminate the healthy flora in our stomach, which is a healthy bacteria. Without the healthy flora, we can have an overgrowth of yeast. And that yeast can cause symptoms such as emotional instability and depression, and it affects our digestion, causing us to take less nutrients in. So in order to restore that healthy flora, we need those things called probiotics, and you hear about them being in yogurt. Other foods such as fermented foods, sourdough, ulican, sauerkraut, miso, vinegar, pickles, moldy cheeses. They all have that fermentation process and can help to increase the healthy gut bacteria. And for feeding children, there's a golden rule, and it's called the division of responsibility. Parents are responsible for what children are offered to eat and the manner in which it's presented. So parents decide what children eat, and children are responsible for deciding how much they eat and even whether they want to eat. The best example of this starts as soon as a child is born with breastfeeding. The parent is deciding the food and the child is deciding how much. When allowed to make the decision, children will eat and they will grow and thrive using the division of responsibility. Do you know a child that's perhaps crabby often, feels cold, is sleepy, or has a hard time paying attention, or perhaps even some extremes such as hair loss, dark circles under their eyes, or they're getting sick all the time from colds and flus? It's possible that the child could have low iron, and this actually applies to adults too. Children need iron for proper brain development, and it's so important in the first few years of life.
Okay, there is a question about the children. Rebecca, Carol is asking if there is an increase of children getting diabetes.
I think that there definitely is, especially type 2 diabetes in the younger population. They have definitely seen a bit of an increase. Mm-hmm. But there's so many factors that are leading to that in society. It's not just, we can't just look at one thing, such as eating too much and weight. There's so many other things that are in our environment. And the best thing that we can do is to just make sure that if that child has risk factors such as their parents having diabetes, or all people of color have high risk of diabetes, that maybe we're starting screening at a younger age.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Thank you, Carol.
Okay. Thanks for the question. Back to iron. We want to make sure that children aren't filling up on sugary drinks, that they're having protein foods at each meal, limiting junk food, because junk food replaces good nutrient foods. We're constantly trying and exploring new foods. And like I was saying, it's important to start those iron foods in the first few years of life. Under the current infant feeding recommendations, we're starting with one of the first foods is protein-rich foods. So we're trying to make sure that the iron is available right away. It's really challenging to eat your way out of iron deficiency, or if a person has anemia. Most people need to take supplements if the doctor has diagnosed them with iron deficiency or anemia. So we want to try to be eating iron-rich foods and possibly having supplements. Iron-rich foods are, there's two different kinds of iron. There's heme iron, which comes from animal products. Red meat is the best, but chicken and fish also have some. And then there's non-heme iron, which comes from plant-based products. Beans and lentils are some of the best sources, and vegetables and some grain products. The challenge is that non-heme iron sources aren't absorbed as well in the body. So what we can do is have a source of vitamin C when we're eating both heme iron and non-heme iron, because it helps our body to absorb it. So if you have broccoli or strawberries or an orange or tomatoes with those foods, it helps your body to absorb them better.
So the best source of iron for people who are vegan, I think you may have addressed that.
For people who are vegan,
yeah.
Beans, peas, lentils have the best source. So kidney beans, as an example, or other lentils have really high levels of iron. But again, if our body doesn't absorb them as much, then having like kidney beans with tomatoes can help to absorb them. And for some people, if they're vegan, they might not be able to get enough, and iron supplements might be necessary.
Thank you, Valerie.
Yeah, thanks.
And Emily.
So another example is a child you know. Perhaps they're hyper and then tired. They're crabby all the time. They have trouble concentrating in school or at home. Or perhaps they're getting a lot out of cavities. They could be eating too much sugar, and then it causes their blood sugar to drop. So what can we do? Try to stop the sugary drinks and candies as much as possible. Eat regular, healthy meals with protein foods at each meal. Offer healthy snacks, and be a role model for families and students. If they see us eating a lot of the sugary drinks and candies, then they're going to model those behaviors as well. The average teen gets 10 to 15 teaspoons of sugar every day from soda. Having 1 can of pop every day has been associated with increasing a child's risk of developing diabetes. So we have to try to get away from the pop as much as possible. 3/4 of children drink 1 soft drink daily, and at least 1/4 consume more than 4 daily. So is this a child you know? They're hyperactive, they have anxiety or fear, they're restless, they have trouble sleeping, or they're grumpy a lot. Perhaps they have too much caffeine. So in addition to the pop having lots of sugar in it, or energy drinks, there's also caffeine in those products. And caffeine can cause children to have anxiety, mood, and sleep problems. It affects them a very similar way to the way that caffeine affects adults, except their bodies are smaller. So what can we do? Promote drinking water or other beverages such as milk, herbal teas, or safe medicine teas. Try to say no to energy drinks as much as possible.
So Keisha's asking, does pop have the same effect on adults?
In terms of sugar?
And yes.
Yeah, absolutely, it does. It's a form of sugar that is so quickly absorbed into our bodies, and our bodies just process it right away, and it absolutely can have the same effect on adults. It causes that spike in blood sugar, and then the blood sugar drops afterwards, and it can cause us to be crabby and tired, and yeah. Children are, again, they're more sensitive to that sort of thing too.
Thank you, Keisha.
So we're going to shift gears a bit now, and we can talk about something that's making some people very rich in the world.
Oh, sorry, there's still typing going on about the pop.
Yeah.
So Emily is asking, can you provide some light on the effects of regular pop, Pepsi, Coke, etc., versus the diet pop? And Suzanne is also asking, please comment on safe medicine teas.
Okay, so regular pop versus diet pop. In moderation, both are fine. But anything too much can be a problem. Although, I mean, in terms of diet pop, when they're looking at the sugar substitutes, such as aspartame, a lot of the studies that they did that were looking at how it can potentially cause cancer, they weren't very good studies. They took mice and they injected them with aspartame. Well, if we injected ourselves with anything, it's going to make us sick, right?
Right.
So they weren't very good studies. So if you're having, you know, 1 can of diet pop every day, then it's probably not that bad. If you're having 3 or 4 or more, then it can be too much. But that's with anything, you know, too much is not a good thing. So they both, you know, the diet pop has those additives in them, and then the regular pop has sugar and lots of other colorings and additives as well. And it depends what you're, you know, if you're a person with diabetes and you want to have something like that, then the diet pop is probably a better choice. Children, though, you know, we probably don't want to be giving them too much sugar substitutes, so it's both. And then
safe medicine teas.
Safe medicine teas. So I don't know a lot about that. I think that I would probably recommend talking to a healer or somebody who knows the medicines that are collected in the area to know whether they're safe for children or not.
There are a few more. Valeria is saying, please comment on soy and soy-based products. And is the product Crystal Light any good?
Crystal Light is really similar to, it's a sugar substitute that adds some flavoring to water. So in moderation, in a small amount, and especially if it gets you to drink a bit more water, it is okay. Again, but too much might not be a good thing. And then I'm not sure related to soy and soy-based products what the question is. Valerie, I don't know if you can expand upon
the soy milk, or
perhaps it's a question with regards to the safety of soy, because there is a lot of controversy about that.
I think the main thing for men, I've heard that it's like an estrogen mimic.
Yeah.
And that for vegetarian men who eat a lot of soy products, they are receiving more estrogen than they need.
Yes, that's what you're just saying. You hit that. That's what she's saying.
Okay.
Is it safe for boys?
So, I don't think I'm going to be very good at answering that question because I don't know the research behind it. There's, you know, perhaps there's some truth to it, but unfortunately, I don't know the research, so I don't want to say anything about it. But thanks for the question. So let's talk a little bit about diets. So fad diets are something that are making some people very rich in this world and others feel like failures. To better understand why diets don't work, I'm going to share a bit of a story. It's out of a book called Switch: How to Change Things When Change is Hard. So some university researchers wanted to study food behavior. They recruited a group of interested participants and asked them to report to the lab hungry, not eating anything for 4 hours before the study. Upon arrival, participants were led into a room that smelled of freshly fried bannock. On the center of the table was a big bowl of it. In another bowl, there were radishes. Researchers told participants that they were testing memory and taste sensations, and they would all be contacted the following day to share their experience. Half of the participants were instructed to eat 1 or 2 pieces of fried bread. The other half were instructed to eat at least 1 or 2 radishes, but no fry bread. The researchers then left the room to see if they can induce temptation in non-radish eaters, but amazingly, they were all able to use their power to resist. At that point, the taste study was over. Researchers then told participants, sorry, I just lost my place. Researchers then told participants that they would like them to participate in another study. They were trying to find out who was better at solving problems, First Nations people from the Lower Mainland or from the interior, with the intention of creating a competitive edge. Participants were then presented with a series of puzzles that required them to trace a complicated geometric shape without retracing the lines or lifting their pencils. The puzzles were designed to be unsolvable. Researchers wanted to see how long the participants would persist in the difficult, impossible task before giving up. The participants that previously were instructed to eat bannock and did not have to resist their temptation were able to spend an average of 19 minutes before giving up. However, the radish eaters were less persistent, spending only an average of 8 minutes. Why did they quit so easily? Because they ran out of self-control. So, as we've learned from this, self-control is an exhaustible resource, and what looks like laziness is often exhaustion. And this applies to diets. When people are on diets, they have to use a lot of self-control to change what is natural to them, or what they're used to, and they are simply becoming exhausted from it. In addition to having devastating effect on our mood and mental well-being, diets can also cause nutritional deficiencies that can lead to mental health problems. Extremely low-fat diets can increase our risk for depression and anxiety, because healthy fat is good for our brains. Extremely low carbohydrate diets can increase risk for fatigue, irritability, and headaches from ketosis. And other elimination diets can cause us to have nutrient deficiencies, which is why we're always promoting a good balanced diet. So what is a healthy diet? It balances nutrition, calories, and emotions. And we never think of that emotions part. Sometimes emotions can trump our nutritional balance and physiology. Everything good takes time and work, and diets are no exception. So something that's for a short term is not going to work, whereas changing things over the long term is what's going to work the best. And we want to promote this concept of health at every size. We accept the fact that dogs come in different shapes and sizes. Why can't we accept that fact for humans? Health at every size is based on a simple premise that the best way to improve our health is to honor our bodies. It supports people in adopting health habits for the sake of health and well-being, rather than for weight control. So health at every size encourages people to accept and respect the natural diversity of body shapes and sizes, to eat in a flexible manner that values pleasure and honors the internal cues of hunger, satiety, and appetite, and to find joy in moving one's body and becoming more physically vital, and not doing it because we are told that's what we should do, and to go to the gym or to do something that we don't enjoy doing. Nutrition can also be linked to mental disorders. There's been an increased prevalence of mental health disorders linked to poor quality diet. Common nutritional deficiencies seen in patients with mental disorders include low omega-3 fatty acids, a lack of B vitamins, and some minerals and amino acids. Could also be linked to depression. 1 in 7 Canadians will experience some type of mood disorder in their lifetime, with depression being the most common. And women experience depression more than men, at a ratio of 2 to 1. Depression has many different causes, including genetics, physical causes for chemical imbalances, experiential causes such as trauma, socioeconomic conditions, stress, abuse, chronic medical conditions such as diabetes, cancer, and arthritis that can all be linked to depression. Depression can lead to severe weight loss and nutrient depletion due to a decreased appetite, food avoidance, or the inability to go out and get food. This becomes a vicious cycle because the lack of nutrients can lead to worsening depressive symptoms. For someone that is experiencing depression, a multivitamin supplement can be important if they're having decreased appetite, or having them supported by loved ones bringing in food, such as good sources of protein, vegetables, and fruit. Depression could also lead to weight gain in some from emotional eating. And the side effects of many common depression medications could also impact their diet, such as nausea, vomiting, constipation, diarrhea, and increased appetite. So for depression and other mood disorders, we're looking at certain medications as a form of treatment. We also want to consider good nutrition, a multivitamin supplement, having loved ones bring in good nutritious food, good sources of protein at every meal, omega-3 fats, vegetables and fruit, as few added sugars as possible. If we think back to when we were talking about the spike in blood sugar and the decrease, we want to avoid those changes in mood as much as possible, and good good regular physical activity. Nutrition can also be related to stress and anxiety. We all deal with stress on a daily basis. Just like we all look and act differently, we cope with stress in different ways. Nutrition can help our bodies deal with the stress. So again, looking at the amount of sugar that we're taking in, we want to try to maintain a stable blood sugar as much as possible. In addition to things like POP, refined carbohydrates can cause a spike in blood sugar and then lowering blood sugar, which leads to anxiety, nervousness, and irritability. In addition, those empty calories are likely replacing calories that have nutritious foods. If a person's prone to anxiety, they might also want to limit the amount of caffeine that they take in. Anxiety disorders can also be caused or heightened by food intolerances. When we're talking about this related to children, perhaps an intolerance to casein, which is a milk protein, or gluten, which is a wheat protein, for some people can increase anxiety. When we also talked about this one, an overgrowth of that healthy gut, or an overgrowth of candida, or the yeast, due to a lack of healthy gut bacteria, can sometimes cause anxiety in people. So if they noticed it followed a bout of taking antibiotics, then that could possibly be the cause.
Login failed. Did we lose connection? Oh, no, sorry.
I have no idea.
Okay, no, we're good now. See?
Uh-oh.
Are we losing connection?
Are you breaking it, Rebecca?
We're yellow. Hang on. Sorry. We're yellow on our video conference.
So what does that mean? How do I fix that?
It's not on our end. I don't think it's the internet connection is going, but
We still have the
yellow.
webinar.
No, we still have here. But look, this is yellow now. It was green.
Should we send John a message?
Yes, our internet. Sorry, Rebecca.
Just a minute, that's okay.
I was just about to leave.
We're experiencing some technical difficulties with our video conference unit, so just please bear with us here for a couple of moments. I think it's our internet connection. John, he sent a message. Sorry. We lost connection to our video conference unit. So what I'm going to do with the people in the chat, there's been a lot of chat going on while they reconnect our VC.
Sure.
And I appreciate the conversation that's been going on. And there was talk about the social determinants of health,
Yes.
and how they're important part of explaining the issue about obesity is
Yes.
very a multifaceted issue. And then Carol stated, I agree, Suzanne, some people have the low metabolism, and some have high. And then there was discussion about, from Emily, I think it can be argued that while buying convenience food, example, junk food, and appears to be less expensive on a short-term basis, on a long-term basis, because of the high sugar and other additives, it can be more expensive based on the experience of ill health that may accompany a less healthy or optimal lifestyle. And then Andrea adds, also many people have lost the capacity to get their own foods from the water in the woods, and they don't have the transportation or the equipment. In this case, hunting, and everyone, even First Nations, needs a license to buy the guns.
That's a great point, and we're actually going to talk a bit more about that soon.
Okay. And then Andrea said, when my husband and son can, they get fish and deer and urchins, crabs, and clams for the elders. We also have the environmental concerns like the red tide. Yes, on Adobe Connect, you can still see and hear us, but it's the video conference. So we're running basically two different modalities of technology. So we run the video conference in conjunction with the Adobe Connect. So that's why I'm still able to see and hear everything that you're doing there. So the our technical wizards are working on reconnecting us. So there's further, Mitra, thank you for joining us. Thank you all. I agree with Emily. I believe that the vegetables and the beans and many other healthy foods come cheaper. People need to become more aware of and more motivated and connected to their own very rich culture.
And that's often linked to a person's food skills and how much they actually are able to be preparing foods. And if we want to increase improve people's diets and increase our access to food, then teaching food skills can be a good way of doing that. Programs like the Canadian Diabetes Association, their Food Skills for Families, is a great way of sharing more food skills.
Showing up. What is our message that we're getting on our screen again when it...
He's asking us.
Login failed, it said.
Oh, John, it keeps showing login failed. Is there anybody in the rooms? Can you hear me?
We're here in Houston.
Okay, thank you. We'll resume.
We're here, Redstone.
Login failed is what we're seeing.
Thank you. Is there any interruptions in the presentation? Because what flashes on our screen is a login fail, and normally when we get that message and our video conference goes yellow, we lose connection.
So you've never had it before?
We've never had it before? No? Oh, okay, I thought.
Okay. So
Okay,
we'll keep
we'll
going
resume.
then?
Yes,
Okay,
let's go.
Thank you.
Is it okay now?
No, we're good.
They can see us?
Yes, they can.
Oh.
They can hear us.
They can hear us, but they can't see us.
No, they won't be able to see us because we have the PowerPoint up.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
But that we're connected is what I'm saying.
Yes.
We're all
Oh,
good.
yes.
Okay,
Sorry.
awesome.
Yes. Okay.
Thank you. Okay, we'll keep going. Alcoholism and nutrient deficiency. We know that there are many people out there struggling with alcoholism. And studies have shown that alcoholics are usually chronically deficient in certain essential nutrients, and replacing these imbalances can reduce or eliminate their cravings when they're trying to recover. So we're looking at other conventional treatments. Along with those conventional treatments, healthy eating and nutrient supplementation should be a part of their recovery plan. Addictive substances can change brain chemistry long after a person stops using drugs or alcohol. A low nutrient-dense diet can hinder their recovery or make it more challenging to recover. Healthy sources of protein should be eaten with every meal. That's because protein contains amino acids, which are the building blocks of our neurotransmitters in our brain. They're linked to things like improved mood, memory, emotions, sleep patterns, and hormone levels. Proteins also help to decrease spikes in our blood sugars, which can help to decrease cravings for a person that's recovering from addiction. In addition, vitamin B, magnesium, and vitamin D are all important for people who are recovering from drug abuse and alcoholism because they may have become depleted in those people. Sugars are often craved by people that are detoxing from drugs and alcohol. This is because sugars can cause the same type of chemical and hormone reactions in the brain that the drugs have caused. But we want to try to avoid sugars as much as possible to aid recovery because this will help reduce cravings over the long term. It can also help with balanced blood sugars, which, as discussed, can be responsible for ups and downs in our moods and behaviors. An addiction to sugar does actually exist. They've been able to find out, do some research on this, and it's likely more common than we realize. So this is even outside of a person that has challenges with addiction to drugs and alcohol. We can all become addicted to sugar. When we eat sugar, just like when a person uses drugs, hormones in the brain react with a pleasure response. With increased use of the sugar, the brain and hormones begin to create sugar cravings, and the pleasure response, again, is similar to a drug craving. The challenge is that we have this pleasure response in our brain the first time or the first bite that we have something, and every time after that we're trying to look for the same sort of pleasure response, but we're not getting the same reaction. Now let's talk about the importance that omega-3 fats have in our mental health and related to many other chronic illnesses and recovery from addictions. So omega-3 fats play a vital role in health. Traditional diets had or have a great source of omega-3 fats. So a lot of people eat food that ate algae, which help to synthesize omega-3 fats. It's linked to reductions in coronary artery disease, heart attack, reduced pain from Crohn's disease or arthritis, decreased blood pressure, improved health for people with diabetes, and look at all this big list of things that omega-3 fats can do. Improves symptoms of postpartum depression, major depression, can be associated with decreased activity in suicide, bipolar disorder, anxiety, stress, and violence, attention deficit disorder, schizophrenia, memory and cognition. It almost seems like omega-3s are this miracle food. So trying to get as many sources of omega-3 fats as possible. Fatty fish, salmon is one of the best sources, and we're really lucky to have an abundance of it in British Columbia. Mackerel, herring, sardines, halibut, mussels are all good sources of omega-3 fats. The one that I don't have up here that's also a good source is ulican. Flax seeds and flax oil are also good sources of omega-3s. If you're going to eat flax seeds, they have to be ground up in order to get the omega-3 out of them. Otherwise, our body just gets rid of them and we're not able to get the nutrients out of them. Walnuts are also a good source. And if we know that we're not getting a lot of omega-3s, then supplements can have a good place to get that source of omega-3 in our diet. This is kind of related to that one question or comment that was going on. In 2009, there was a study done called the First Nations Food, Nutrition, and Environment Study, and it looked at a number of communities across BC and the foods that they were eating and trying to look at environmental contaminants. The top five traditional foods that were eaten were salmon, moose, deer, elk, and trout. And the top 5 market foods were soup, veggies, potatoes, fruits, and grains, which is good. This is good to see that most of these foods are good natural sources of nutrients. 40% of people worried that they would run out of food. That food security issue is certainly a major one, and we were talking about the social determinants of health and the impact that can have on the foods that we're eating. So we definitely have to keep that in mind. 91% of people said that they would like to eat more traditional foods. But there were many barriers listed that people talked about related to trying to eat more traditional foods. So a lack of equipment or transportation, a lack of availability of traditional foods, a lack of time. We're all increasing the amount that we have to do and running under high stress. Difficult to access traditional foods, and government regulations related to firearms was another barrier to accessing traditional foods. There were also many voices of concern related to this study. So the impacts of colonization, consistent sources of funding, a loss of land, a lack of food skills or access to food, which we were just talking about a little bit, poor access to food programs, a worry about contamination of traditional foods. This is one of the biggest questions that we're getting from communities related to contamination of traditional food sources. We don't really have a lot of, we don't have specific information related to your communities. What they did find from this study, though, was that most sources of traditional foods are still safe to eat. There are only a very few pockets around the province, and you probably know better about whether or not there's some risks related to the traditional foods in your area. But what you can do, if you have some questions about that, is talk to an environmental health officer in your community or in your area about the sources of traditional foods and whether there's any risk. Another voice of concern was poor or no transportation to accessing food or perhaps to trying to go out and hunt, and hunger and frustration. So we talked a lot today about mental health and extreme diets, but we should talk a little bit about what is normal eating or healthy eating. So Ellen Sater is a brilliant dietitian and shares a lot about, really realistic aspects of eating. She was also the author of that, the Golden Rule, the division of responsibility. So she says that normal eating is going to the table hungry and eating until you are satisfied. It is being able to choose the food that you like and eat it and truly get enough of it, not just stopping because you think you should. Normal eating is being able to give some thought to your food selection so that you get nutritious food, but not being so wary and restrictive that you miss out on enjoyable food. Normal eating is giving yourself permission to eat sometimes because you are happy, sad, or bored, or just because it feels good. Normal eating is mostly 3 meals a day, or 4 or 5, or it can be choosing to munch along the way. It is leaving some cookies on the plate because you know you can have some again tomorrow, or it is eating more now because they taste so wonderful. Normal eating is overeating at times, feeling stuffed and uncomfortable, and it can be undereating at times, wishing you had more. Normal eating is trusting your body to make up for your mistakes in eating. Normal eating takes up some of your time and attention, but keeps its place as only one important area of your life. In short, normal eating is flexible. It varies in response to your hunger, your schedule, your proximity to food, and your feelings. So I really like that because it really talks about that aspect of balance. And we were talking before about the impact or the short-term impact that processed foods or fast food can have on our mental health. And that's okay though on a short-term basis. I think sometimes it's worth the sacrifice to eat something unhealthy and eat with friends. We just have to think about it in terms of the big picture. And we want to eat in a mindful and intuitive way. So mindful or intuitive eating is a non-diet approach to health and wellness. So it's eating based on hunger and satiety rather than emotions and habits, although we want to keep in mind that sometimes emotions have an impact. We have to listen to our body and our hunger cues. We want to eat for enjoyment and for health. And we want to eat foods that are closer to their natural form. So really the big question is, what is optimal eating for mental well-being? Well, it's a number of things. It's who we're eating with family and with friends, or sometimes it's eating alone. It's what we're eating, so trying to eat as many unprocessed, whole foods, traditional foods, or natural foods as possible, with lots of colors, and listening to your body. It's where we're eating. We want to try to avoid eating in the car or in front of the TV or at the computer, perhaps not taking a lunch when you're at work. And it's when and how. So regular meals and eating mindfully, savoring the flavors, aromas, colors, and textures of foods, and truly enjoying what you're eating. It's also, we were talking about it's who you're eating with. So we want to eat in a great way. So gathering around the table to eat food as a family or as a community. When families eat together, children do better in school, they have better language skills, they're more likely to be a healthy weight, they're more connected to their families and friends, they have a better understanding of their values and traditions, they're less likely to smoke, use drugs or alcohol, they're less likely to be bullied, they have a lower risk of depression, they feel more secure. And families that eat together have a stronger family ties. They're more likely to eat vegetables, fruits, and other foods that are high in nutrients. They enjoy a greater variety of foods. They save money by eating out less often, and they create family traditions and memories. One of the great resources that I saw recently was put out by New Channel. They made table talk cards that you can print out, and they just have little topics that you can ask your family questions. So, who is your favorite superhero, or who is your role model, and they're not related to healthy eating at all. They're just some good questions to kind of get to know your family a bit more and keep the conversation at the table really light.
That's great.
So you can find them. I don't actually remember where I got them from, but New Channel, that's them. Catherine's just holding them up right now.
That's great.
They're fantastic. Now this is a picture from a small community, what they had available to eat. And as you can see, there's a lot of, there's some good things there, but there's a lot of processed things there. So we want to make sure that when we have the chance, that we let food be the medicine for our healing. So just to wrap up a little bit, I wanted to share some of the other presentations that we have coming up in the Aboriginal Nutrition Webinar Series. So on March 13th, we have Fantastic Foods for Babies and Moms Too with Jerry Caston. On March 27th, we have Suzanne Johnson co-presenting with some community members on traditional foods and healthy eating. On April 10th, I'll be coming back to talk about chronic disease prevention and management related to healthy eating. And then we've already started looking at rerunning this series again. Thank you very much for doing that. So we're so happy to have you guys joining us. One of the things I wanted to say was that if you have comments or questions about things, we've created this new email address. So we have a First Nations Health Authority healthy eating team, which includes us 3 dietitians, Jerry, Suzanne, and myself, and Dr. Georgia Kaiba, who's a naturopathic physician. You can email us at nutrition@fnha.ca, and this way you can send any of your questions about nutrition or healthy eating to that email address, and one of us will get back to you. If you also have some feedback from our presentations, please feel free to send those. So we want to make sure that we're meeting the needs of the communities and answering any questions, or perhaps you want us to include a certain topic in our presentations, we can definitely do that. I also have my direct contact information there.
So is there any comments, questions that you would like to ask or comment about from today's presentation. So Mitra makes a statement here. I believe that obesity, depression, and anxiety, smoking and addiction, etc., are all part of a vicious circle, interconnected, and I also think that breaking this chain is easiest in the healthy lifestyle part. I know even this is not as easy too.
Certainly, it's we often just look at obesity or illness related to a person's individual choice or lifestyle factors, and it's certainly not related to that. We have to look at the big picture and other, the impact of intergenerational trauma and effects that can impact a person's health overall. We know when a bunch of, a whole group of health professionals will get together and they'll talk about various topics such as chronic disease, and they'll talk about poverty, and they'll talk about the social determinants of health. But when we sit down with an individual, we start blaming them for their own choice right away, and we have to stop doing that. We have to look at the bigger picture of what's impacting people and trying to promote them where they're at and with their own goals in life.
Most definitely. Is there any questions or comments from the video conference room? I see Redstone, Houston, Kispiox. There was one other. I think Three Corners was on there.
In Kispiox, it's Marianne Spears. I was just wondering, I have a client, actually the father was obese. He died from complications related to that. But what I'm witnessing now is the widow is allowing her daughter to continue to eat not necessarily just fast foods, but she gives her money for chips and pop, and it appears to be a deferral type of comfort. I'm not sure how to describe it, but that's what it looks like. She gives her money and says, okay, go get this and go get that. So how can I deal with something like that?
Yeah, that's certainly a challenge, and it's likely that it's not just related to food and nutrition. It's a bigger issue related to mental health and other challenges that they're having in their life. I think just trying to continue to support with good information and looking at their overall wellness and what's going on in their life, and try to support them as much as possible with good reinforcement and good messages.
Yes, but I'm wondering, how do I get the mother to realize, like, she does already know why her husband died, and she does see her daughter gaining weight, but how do I really, I don't want to force them onto anything, but on the other hand, as a nurse, I know what they should be doing, and how do I really, I guess I'm stuck, and the daughter is really getting obese too.
Yeah. Do you can send me an email directly, and we could try to work to come up with some good solutions. I think, one of if it's just starting small and asking them where, like, if there's one small goal that they want to do for their health, and just looking at it in a little stepwise basis, and trying to, it can really seem overwhelming, or trying to change everything, and as you're saying, you're feeling a bit stuck. So feel free to call me directly or email me, and we can try to work together a bit to help them.
Okay, thanks.
I guess from a personal perspective, I'm not sure if up in Kispiox you have an elder that sits on your health team, but maybe more of an integrated team approach, because in cases as a health director where I was dealing with a family like on multiple issues, I could say things and say them and say them and say them. But an elder could come with me and could say the exact same thing and the light bulb would turn on. So there are, hopefully you have some support, and maybe it's not just you, but from a health director's point of view, that's what I found most effective on those cases where we know it's in the best interest of the child or the children involved, that a lot of times I could say, pick up the diaper, that we need to get this cleaned up. We're going to show you how to clean the house. But if an elder came in and said, get up, go do this, go do that, they were better able to, to make the changes to the lifestyle that supported the children being with them. Yeah. And that's just one suggestion. I don't know. That's how I kind of dealt with some of the tougher cases where we know change needed to happen.
That's a great suggestion. Mm-hmm. Thanks, Crystal.
Are there any other comments or questions from Redstone or Hoiston or Three Corners and people online? I don't see anything happening online for the Adobe Connect. And I guess this is as good time as any. I kind of feel like I have two more sessions after today. I am actually leaving the UBC Learning Circle, but I just want everybody to stay connected to the UBC Learning Circle. There's been some really good resources, really good working relationships built. The UBC Learning Circle is planned well in advance to the end of March. There are sessions being planned until April. And just asking for the continued support of the new, whomever is going to assume this role as the Aboriginal Education Coordinator for the UBC Learning Circle, that you continue to support and guide them with your feedback, your suggestions, sharing best practices. So I'm kind of feeling like that Regis and Kelly sort of thing. When Regis had his big departure from, the morning talk show, I'm having my departure, and, because I think back over the past 18 months where I started and where we are today here with the UBC Learning Circle. And it's because of you and community, right, that guides and gives us feedback and supports us by participating in our circles and expanding that. We are always open to suggestions and ideas here at the UBC Learning Circle, especially going into our year-end annual report. Those comments and feedback become really key for our funding service provider, which is the First Nations Health Authority. So please do send those comments back to Catherine or myself. I am here till a week tomorrow. My last day is February 14th, and we do have 2 upcoming learning circles. So what I am going to do, I'm actually moving to community. I'm moving back up into the interior. So some of the people up at Three Corners, I'm just down the road from you. I'll be at Bonaparte. So upcoming learning circles. And at this time, I definitely want to say thank you to our technical support, Catherine Berry, Stephen Prevost, Amanda Ketching, and John, I'm not sure if I'm going to, Brian McComb. Thank you very much. Our technical support staff is growing, and really appreciate all the work that goes in behind the scenes in putting a UBC Learning Circle together. So there has been a lot of work over the past 18 months of people you don't see on the screen that has happened, and I just hold up my hands and say thank you. Heichka, Cooksjam. So upcoming learning circles, as Rebecca mentioned, there are some upcoming future health and nutrition. So February 11th, we have a presentation by the BC Aboriginal Network on Disability Society, their health and resources, their support and disability programs. So they'll be linking to us from Victoria. They actually approached us and said that they would like to have a presentation on the UBC Learning Circle. And February 13th, which was it's leading change and getting started on leadership for physical activity. It's a partnership between Healthy Families BC, the Aboriginal Youth Interns, and the Ministry of Health. And we will also have Grand Chief Doug Kelly sharing his story and his personal journey as a leader, making the choice to become healthy, his successes, his challenges, and sharing his personal journey. So February 20th, we'll have an evening session. We have the Aboriginal Women in Law. It's a partnership with Simon Fraser University and the First Nations Student Association. That is webinar only, right? Or is it?
And February 18th. I forgot to print them out for you.
Oh.
On your screen.
So February 18th, we have an afternoon session with Albert Pooley. This is a recent addition, so please promote to your social workers, your frontline workers, the family violence. He's a speaker from the United States that is coming here for a presentation or for a workshop here in the city. So Albert Pooley. February 20th, as I was stating, Aboriginal Women in the Law. We're moving to an evening session from 7 to 9. In addition to that, March 11th, what we heard and the feedback that we were receiving at Gathering Wisdom is that there was more need for lateral violence. So when research was done, we found Denise from Kauai Consulting out of North Vancouver. And she'll be doing a presentation called Making Sense of Lateral Violence. And if you search that on Facebook, you will see that she has a Facebook page and she posts all these wonderful weekly posts about dealing with lateral violence. And she has little YouTube blurbs on how to deal with different aspects and even becoming more aware of yourself, how to deal with it, all just great points that she has put together on a weekly basis on YouTube as well. March 13th, we have early childhood nutrition, as Rebecca mentioned, with Jerry Caston. Very lively presentation that he has, very interactive. March 27th, we have traditional foods with Suzanne Johnson and the First Nations Health Authority. And we are actually looking at securing John and Natanis as co-presenters. Yes, we will work on those pieces of fitting the pieces together and having them speak as well. Their story is very interesting because there's a family of, I think, 10 of them that have actually called re-indigenizing. That's the words that they use for their whole family. April 10th, healthy eating for wellness and chronic disease prevention and management with Rebecca. Rebecca, our lovely Rebecca, will be back here at the UBC Learning Circle. So did I miss something? April 15th. The Roots of Bullying, our second session in lateral violence. The Roots of Bullying, how the bully is created. We will have Denise back here at the UBC Learning Circle. So please have a look at our new UBC Learning Circle webpage. Follow us on Twitter and friend us on Facebook. So thank you for joining us today. Is there any final comments or questions from the VC video conference units or from the chat? There is a comment here.
They were just saying thank you.
Oh, yes, thank you, Carol. I appreciate best wishes to all of you as well, and I'm sure our paths will cross again.
Thank you for Houston.
Thank you. We'll see you next week.
Thanks, everyone.
And thank you.
Thank you. Have a great day.
Okay.